Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Anime Brain Freeze. We are your sharp-shooting hosts.
I am John.
And I'm CC, and when there's just too much cool anime to watch, we got you covered. Today we look at two adaptations/interpretations of older material, one much more seasoned than the other. First, John will talk about a new comedic take, I believe, on the classic Shakespearean tale of Romeo and Juliet, only this time set at a boarding school and thus appropriately titled Boarding School Juliet.
Indeed.
And then we will travel to the seedy gangland of New York and discuss the adaptation of the 80s manga Banana Fish. So hope you enjoy your tonal whiplash. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back.
Yes, so we begin today with yet another high school rom-com. You know, I can't seem to escape my fate. It's that or idol anime, isn't it?
You are the target audience.
That's my MO. That's what I'm going to be known for.
There was worse things to be known for, actually, so...
I suppose, but I've been finding it harder to get pulled in on the teen rom-com angle unless it's, you know, slightly better written than our wonderful resident whipping boy gamers. Always and forever, never forget. So Boarding School Juliet. It's all about at Dahlia Academy, a prestigious boarding school attended by students of two feuding countries, the eastern nation of Towa and the Principality of the West. Romeo Inuzuka, leader of the dorm's Towa first years, wishes for a romance that can never be. For his lady love is none other than his archenemy, Juliet Persia, leader of the dorm's West first years. Is Inuzuka ready to risk it all to confess his feelings? And even if Persia somehow agrees to go out with him, how long can they keep a forbidden relationship under wraps? And a lot of the questions, these answers come up almost immediately, so... There's no spoilers in saying within the first episode we have a confession and a yes, I'll go out with you. And it's funny because in a lot of these shows there's a lot of will they, won't they, and Romeo just right in the first episode as he and Juliet are having a duel with swords just sort of blurts out, I love you, go out with me. And it catches Juliet so off guard that she's like, I can't say no to that.
With a story like Romeo and Juliet going back and forth in a way of will they, won't they seems kind of, I don't know, redundant because you already know where this is going. Kinda. At least if it stays somewhat close to its source material.
I mean, it takes liberties, let's say.
Well,
lots of them.
If it's a comedic angle, then that's obvious, kinda. Because the original is a romantic tragedy, I guess. Which makes me immediately ask, is there any of that left in here? Or is this a pure comedic take? Or is this is this turning into something different by the end?
I mean, surely the comedy angle is one of the strongest parts of it. But there's concerns about whether or not, you know, they can actually stay together because they are essentially, you know, star-crossed lovers from two different worlds. And, you know, that sort of threatens Romeo's position of where he is among being the leader of the first year of the Towa dorm. Oh, by the way, I lacked to mention that the name of the Towa dorm is the Black Dogs and the name of the Principality dorms is the White Cats. And they do some fun stuff with that, especially with character names that are obscenely punny. Like one of Romeo's childhood friends is named Husky.
Very good.
They just sort of do that sort of stuff. I mean, like Juliet's last name is Persia, a Persian cat.
Yeah.
There you go. There's a character named Somali Longhaired. Like, come on. like
There's a little on the nose.
There's a character named Kate Sith.
Oh, well, that could be either thing. I mean, could also be a Final Fantasy reference.
It's true. But they The author, Yosuke Kaneda, kind of leans into that pretty heavily, and it's cute. It's funny.
All right.
Um, but yeah, there's a lot of concern of whether or not Romeo is actually fit to keep leading the first year Black Dogs, because he he just wants to be a good and faithful boyfriend to Juliet. And even though this is chiefly comedy, there's something sweet about it because he's just so stupidly head over heels for her after the initial confession, and that just sort of gets in the way of everything else in his life, especially when his big brother Iru comes knocking on the door to say, "Yo, what's going on here? What's the matter with you?"
I mean, in original, it's about like warring families, kinda. So this seems much more low stakes endeavor because it's, you know, just rivaling dorms. I mean, where does the drama come? The drama come in? Where do the stakes come in? This is just like, okay, him being in danger from getting expelled from the dorm for being in love with Juliet, or, you know, both of them getting expelled from their positions or whatever, or from the school even, or is there some, I don't know, some more deeper thing that where their families get involved or something?
It doesn't really seem, as far as I can tell, maybe it comes in later on, outside of the scope of this show, because this was only like 13 episodes, and the manga has been running for almost 4 or 5 years now. Apparently the last volume just came out in the middle of December. So,
well, that feels like they have, especially if the romance is kind of like, let's say, decided on in the very beginning, it feels like there's a lot more stuff to come here then.
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
That's definitely the impression I got watching this. It came across more of a not so much you get expelled from the school sort of thing, but more of a, oh, you'll lose your standing, and you know how all of your classmates and friends and comrades view you, because at one point Romeo is seen as unfit to lead the Black Dog dorm. And Juliet isn't really ever called into question, but her close friend Chartreuse kind of gets very hot on the case of what's going on here. And then when she sort of realizes it, she sort of starts to take advantage of Romeo and is like, hey, you can do every little last thing for me. I'm going to blow this whistle and you're going to come. And if you don't, well, I guess your secret's going to get blown out of the water.
What a lovable person.
It does seem that way at first, but there is sort of the characters come to an understanding, and there's sort of this camaraderie. But Char basically says to Romeo, listen, if you do bad by my best friend, then you're done for.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
But, there's a lot more of characters talking things out and coming to understandings throughout this series than you would actually think, given the setup and the subject material. And I think that's why it was able to hang on to me, because unlike other shows, that's what, that's what I want to see. I just want to see, I want to see these characters being happy and talking things out. And that's what makes the characters actually likable, that they want to, make it work. Because I feel like this is a story that at its core is about making a healthy relationship among everyone else who would tell you otherwise. It's about following your heart, man.
Yeah, that's a nice sentiment on a very basic level. And then the show is actually able to bring it across in a convincing way and go beyond the, let's say, okay, this is a superficial high school romance. No, these characters actually feel for each other and have, I don't know, commonalities or something. And so that makes sense that these two should be together, even though, the odds are against them. And I don't know, it sounds like the show is doing that.
Yeah, it does. And, there's obviously scenes of contention where, again, where I talked about earlier, where Romeo has a run-in with his brother, and at one point Juliet's like, we can't keep going like this. This is only hurting you. But, Romeo, he still wants to work it out, man. So without giving away later on plot points too much, they sort of stage this big to-do, and it's goofy and it's dumb, and that's really what this show is. It's silly, but in its silliness, there is that message of you just got to be you and do what makes you happy. So I think that it made it a lot stronger for me than I was previously anticipating, because I looked at this show, I was like, oh, I'm gonna watch 3 episodes and just push it aside. No, I sat down and watched the whole thing, and I feel like I had a pretty good time with it. So
yeah, it sounds like it's very earnest about the whole affair and the whole setup and its characters, and it's trying to bring them together. And also, I like you mentioned, the stuff with them actually talking this stuff out. Yeah, I'm also always a big fan of shows actually doing that instead of resorting to your standard misunderstanding tropes or whatever in regards to romance as a subject matter.
Yeah, because that gets really tired. And I mean, we've talked about how tired it has become.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was another show that I watched alongside this that it didn't. I don't know if I'd say it really had a lot of misunderstandings, because it wasn't built on a foundation of comedy. It was more about a story of self-discovery, and we'll get to that show sooner rather than later. But I mean, these stories about finding the characters knowing what they want and then fighting in like not always logical means to get to the end point, but knowing that it's something that they want to hold on to and that they're working towards these like end goal relationships, friendships, what have you. I mean that manifests in other genres as well as your typical rom-com. I mean, how many other shows have we talked about earning something through your own power and then protecting it? Every shonen action anime ever.
Mm-hmm. At least those.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's probably like the big cornerstone of that. But I feel like this was a great way of showing that, yeah, you can extend that idea to other genres. And as weird as it is, you can make it work. And it's so great. Because in this show, like, even the most staunchly opposable characters, except for maybe like one of them, do eventually feel pretty sympathetic, and that really got me on board with it. Even one of Juliet's underlings, as it were, Scott, he wants Juliet to say, "Oh, I'm so in love with you," and it's always undone because he ends up getting pulled aside by Chartreux and being like, "Hey, you could work for me instead because Juliet's got her own man. You don't got to worry about that." And it's silly, it's goofy, it's cute. Tell you one thing though, this show had a hell of a cast. The main leads played by Ai Kayano and Yuki Ono. I believe Ai Kayano has been currently Alice in Sword Art Online, among many other things. Yuki Ono was Josuke in JoJo's, so we've heard him before. Mm-hmm. But so it's kind of funny, because Iru is voiced by Daisuke Ono, so we have literally Josuke versus Jotaro at one point in the story. But yeah, and like I said, I'm not going to run down all of the names, but the cast is really strong, and for as silly as the show is, they really gave some strong performances, and they brought some great life to these characters, and it was more than I thought it would be. It ended up being really enjoyable, and I'm glad I sat down and watched it because I don't know what inspired me to check it out, but it was just a fun little curiosity. I will say, though, that one of our favorite studios worked on this show, and that was Leiden Films. And we know they have a history, but...
And but sometimes they dish out great stuff. I mean, they did Hannibal. So
That's true.
I mean, I didn't know where that budget was coming from and why that show looked so good, but it goddamn did. So is that the case here too?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's not a super great looking show filled with sakuga, but they got the job done, and it looks fine throughout its entire run. So I don't think there are any glaring animation issues where I was like, ooh,
Yeah.
I mean, they also worked on, you talked about Killing Bites.
Yes. Also not necessarily a stellar outing.
But you enjoyed it for what it was.
Oh yeah, I did. But mostly, the animation quality wasn't good at all. The direction was very strong, though. The direction and the editing and everything that entails was just really good in that show. And and it was just great trash. Just, yeah. I can't call it anything else. It was, I mean, it's in a trash stash for a reason.
Man, it's funny because every time I finish watching Dororo on Amazon, they keep pulling up, hey, this next suggested show is Killing Bites. And I'm like,
Do it, John. You definitely won't regret it. Probably, though. You will, though.
I don't know. Maybe someday when I have absolutely nothing to watch.
That will never happen.
Yeah. Yeah, the show was directed by Seiki Takuno, who hasn't done a lot of directorial work. Done stuff like Love and Lies, Yamada and the Seven Witches, the perennial hit Sculpture Boys. Boy, that was an adventure of a show.
I think I've never watched that or even heard of it.
It's about, it was called Sekko Boys in Japanese. And it was about these, literally the marble busts of these different philosophers throughout time and how they're somehow famous actors and their agent wheels them around on a hand truck because, they're literally pieces of rock and they can't move around for themselves. And it's dumb. It's really dumb.
That's the weirdest shit I've heard in a while. Holy fuck.
Welcome to anime.
What?
Welcome to anime.
Oh my god. Okay. How come I've never heard of this nonsense? Oh,
because it was one of those short form shows. So
Seiko Boys. All right. Well, I gotta keep that somewhere in the back of my head.
It was dumb. It was really dumb. I don't know whether or not I'd say it was good, but it was solidly stupid.
Okay.
Yeah, and the scripting and composition is worked on by Takao Yoshioka, who's worked on stuff like The Familiar of Zero, the third series of Seven Deadly Sins, 3 of the different working series. So there you go. You hit my aesthetic right away.
Mm-hmm.
Watamote, Your Lie in April, which is something I still want to watch.
Yeah, good things about that.
Yeah, I mean, I hear it's if you want to cry your eyes out, it's great. But yeah, so Boarding School Juliet just kind of hit on all of the right notes, and I was really, really surprised at how tightly written and executed it was. Because, like I said, again, I thought this was going to be a nothing show. I think it's worth checking out. Even if you only watch a couple episodes, you get a pretty good idea really early on of who the characters are and how they're going to jump through hoops in order to keep what they have as it is.
In terms of displaying a blossoming romantic relationship that both people are willing to work at, does it do as good of a job as Wotakoi did, or would you say that's still a league of its own?
Oh, Wotakoi and MMO Junkie are kind of on their own tier that I don't think anything is going to touch for me in a long time, if ever at all, ever again.
I mean, those shows have the benefit that they cater to an older audience, that, or let's say an audience that is more closer to our age range. But I mean, let's say, even though it's a high school setting, does Boarding School Juliet kind of try to venture in at least the same kind of grounded exploration of this kind of relationship? Or is it more, I don't know, rose-colored, more high, I don't want to call it high drama, but let's say over-emphasized emotions that, your usual high school romance has? Or has it a more realistic touch than those high school romances usually do?
Well, I mean, the fact that it's Romeo and Juliet should probably tell you everything you need to know.
Okay. All right.
But like I said, it leans into that pretty heavily. So I think that's what gives it its strength, because it rarely ever takes itself too seriously. So
it is a fun time.
Yes. It's a fun time, and I enjoyed it. And if you feel like checking out just this fluffy, silly story about two kids trying to make it work in a world that doesn't want it to, you can check it out on Amazon right now.
Ash Lynx is the 17-year-old leader of a powerful street gang in downtown New York. Equipped with S-rank marksman skills and an IQ above 200, he is rightfully respected and feared by his comrades and enemies respectively, even though being still of a very young age. One night he runs into a man who hands him a small cylinder, only able to tell him an address and the words banana fish before dying in his arms. After investigating, Ash quickly finds a connection between the drug contained in the cylinder, his traumatized war veteran brother Griff, and the person who raised and abused Ash for the majority of his young life, the mafia boss Dino Golzine. After more and more of the truth behind the mysterious banana fish is revealed, Ash swears to exact revenge for his brother and take down Golzine and his whole operation. Eiji Okumura, a 19-year-old boy from Japan, gets roped into this impending gang war when he and his senior Shunichi Ibe try to interview Ash for a story about American gangs. Both boys feel an instant connection, but will this blossoming friendship survive the harsh trials that await Ash on his chosen path of violence and hatred? So Banana Fish, the anime, is based on a manga by Akimi Yoshida and was published between 1985 and 1994. It ran for 19 volumes. The author has done a bunch of other stuff, but the only thing I think I've heard of in passing is Bobby's Girl, which is a movie she did the character design for. The rest of the stuff doesn't really ring a bell. Lover's Kiss, maybe. I think I've heard that too before, but I'm not quite sure. And I've definitely not checked any of those out.
Yeah, that name is familiar, because I was looking over all the names too, and that's the only one that vaguely rang a bell.
I've definitely heard people talk about Bobby's Girl before, but yeah, aside from that. The anime is a 26-episode series done by MAPPA, which we have talked about many times on the show already, so I don't need to rattle off their repertoire again. But so far they have proven to be a pretty good choice when it comes to adapting older stuff like this. As an example, Ushi on Tora was fantastic, and the currently airing Dororo is so far also a great update of the classic source material.
Mm-hmm.
So animation-wise, Banana Fish is a very solid show. The art is pretty consistent, and even though they update a lot of the tech stuff in the show, like introducing smartphones and stuff like that, it manages to retain that visual style of 80s New York that you might be familiar with if you've watched a lot of 80s Hollywood movies. I think, that's what I imagined that that city to look in an 80s manga, and they kind of try to keep that the way it was back then. The animation itself can look really good and fluid, especially in its first two and last episode. Things get a bit more mixed in between, but it's generally on a very good quality level. Character designs also feel appropriately old-timey, which I liked. The way the chins are drawn and the eyes and everything. Just in general, the faces, some of the bodies too, and environments and everything has kind of an older manga/anime feel to it, which I always appreciate. Some of the action scenes are also really well staged, directed, and choreographed. Hiroko Utsumi, who also directed the first 2 seasons of Free, did a really good job with the resources he had here. And yeah, I generally like the look of the show. I think, a few inconsistencies aside, very few off-model shots aside, this was a generally really impressive show just in terms of visual style and everything. What did you think about it?
Yeah, the character designs and like the action choreography were all really solid, like you said. I sort of took issue with the fact that they kind of changed it from the 80s to a modern day setting, because I felt, especially at certain points, like my favorite super hacker trope was in there.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
that kind of pushed the wrong button for me, and I'm like, I'm sure this wasn't in the original story.
Well, how could it have been, right? Or I mean, I at least can't imagine him sitting at, I don't know, 286 or something and doing that shit. I mean, there's no internet. I wonder. I mean, that's a reason to go back to the manga, because some of the stuff he later pulls in the Ash later pulls in the show with his revenge plot and everything is like, okay, how exactly did he do that and get a hold of that money and stuff like that? You're in the original, did they rob a bank that Golsina had owned or something like that? I don't know. So that's interesting. There's a lot of stuff in there that, like John said, makes you wonder, how was that in the original? Because that only works because they updated that story to modern day.
Yeah.
And it couldn't have worked. And some of the things happening the way they did, like people actually being able to get into contact with each other, and some people getting notice ahead of certain things and stuff that could not have happened in the old material. So I wonder how much they really changed. I mean, I looked at the very rough outline of the story, and the basic big plot beats are apparently all in the manga. So it doesn't seem like they changed too much there. The ending is apparently exactly the same. So
yeah, that I had read about. So I was like, okay, at least they kept that the same.
Yeah, I wonder how much they changed in between. So it would be interesting to go check out at least some key scenes that I imagine are very different in the source material, and check out how they were there when compared to the anime. Yeah, let's talk about the story. First off, this is a show that comes with a very serious content warning. A lot of Ash's story is about sexual abuse and the trauma resulting from that. How that affects a person in the long run is one of the biggest themes in the series, and even during the course of the series, Ash and other characters get sexually assaulted several times. Thankfully, this is never played for laughs, and always as something horrible that needs to be condemned and is doing great harm to the victims. And the show also rarely explicitly shows the physical act of the abuse. It, however, revels a lot in the psychologically and emotional aftermath of it, which can be tough to watch, even for people who have never experienced such a horrifying thing for themselves. But if you have, you should probably avoid this show, or at least be aware that these themes are featured heavily in Banana Fish. I've heard that the author of the manga is also a survivor of sexual assault, and thus used the manga to discuss the many hardships such an experience entails. But I could not confirm that info with the bit of research I did for myself, so take all of that with a grain of salt. Now, what's also interesting about Banana Fish is that it's considered to be a key influence on the boys' love or BL genre in manga and anime. And even though Ash and Eiji's relationship never quite reaches that level of explicitity and commitment to showing an actual gay relationship, it is definitely heavily implied.
It's about a step away from it, I feel like.
Yeah, you could say it's on the same level as Yuri on Ice in that regard, but with a very different tone, because that was more of a romance-focused thing. I mean, there was some, thing about depression and trauma in Yuri on Ice as well, but in here, it's dealt alongside a much more harsher subject matter with all the sexual abuse stuff in there. So, but yeah, like John said, it's one step away to being basically text. And there are a lot of, lingering shots of the characters looking longingly into each other's eyes and everything. And making certain gestures and stuff like that, and being very physically close and everything, comforting each other, stuff that you would normally see in a heterosexual relationship depicted in one of those series, where you would immediately say, yeah, these two characters are in love. That's it. It's just that the show doesn't outright tell you this. I don't know, because they can't, because maybe in Japan that's still not done, at least not on TV, maybe, I don't know. And the original manga apparently never did so either, but it always was like this very clear subtext where it's like, yeah, these two characters, at least on an emotional level, are in love and mean a lot to each other for one reason or another. In the anime, this is maybe more so the case than in the manga even. There's this usual playful teasing and the series keeping up appearances by having like the two main characters talk about girls at certain points that you get from your general run-of-the-mill Fujoshi bait show as well, where it's like, no, trust us, these characters are straight because they talk about girlfriends. But you don't really buy it because of everything else, or because of how the characters interact with each other otherwise. So, yeah. And there's definitely a deeper connection between Ash and Eiji that has the feel of a classic tragic romance. And the direction and visual language does enough to heavily imply that those two are definitely more to each other than just good friends. So yeah, I can see where this is coming from, given the time that this story originally was published, and that being a big influence on the BL genre sounds very reasonable to me, judging from what I've seen in this show. And, it takes Ash and Eiji like 11 episodes to have an actually normal conversation where you could maybe like see, oh, okay, now these characters actually get to know each other. Before it was just a subconscious connection and an instant attraction to each other that is maybe more on a spiritual level or something. But in episode 11, it's like, okay, these characters have a constructive talk and open up more to each other, and you feel like, okay, there is a connection, and that connection is deepened right now, and there's a reason why that is here. There's a reason why these characters feel kind of like kindred spirits, and even though they're very different people, at least on some level, I mean, they have common ground, but they have very different upbringing and come from very different places, or are at very different places in their lives. But there are some things where they feel like, okay, that person also has experienced some hardships and some feeling of loss and everything, and that is kind of maybe comparable to mine. Not really, but that's the thing that makes them relate to each other. I think the only problem is that it takes the show so long to get there, because there's a lot of stuff happening in the story beforehand that makes it very important for you to believe that Ash would go to extreme lengths to protect Eiji from harm.
Mm.
And I'm not quite sure that the show is doing a stellar job at convincing us of that before, like I said, the 11th episode, where their relationship is like really deepened and they have like a couple of big talks. I mean, there are some small talks here and there. Beforehand, there's like this scene at, where was it? Oh yeah, the scene at where they are at Ash's old home in Cape Cod, where they do the gun training. And there's some other scenes like that where you see, oh, they have some interaction and there's definitely a connection, but it doesn't feel as deep as it later feels like at the midpoint of the show. But there's so much stuff happening before that where it's like Ash acting like Eiji is the most important thing to him in the world already. And you are kind of wondering, okay, where is this coming from? I mean, I get those two have a connection, but this is dedication. And one scene especially where it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, that person must be really important to you. Otherwise, you would definitely not have done this. And yeah, I feel like the show hasn't really earned that emotional conviction for Ash at this point. I don't know, how did you feel about that? I think you know which scene I'm talking about, because it's probably the most emotionally harrowing in this show, and it's also happening kind of at the midpoint.
I think my issue was that this is going to sound dumb. This is probably going to sound really dumb. But why is Ash like everything he does is like calculated down to, the precise pinpoint. He's like so perfect in all of these things. There's just something about the way he's written, maybe not from the very beginning. I don't know how to describe what it is, because I just got to a point where I was kind of like, he's just doing these things because he's so good at planning everything, and no matter what, he'll make it work out. And I don't know, that didn't really hit home for me. Certainly there's probably other criticisms you could lay upon the character, and you have started to. But
so you mean the whole him being able to account for everything was a problem for you?
Yeah.
All right. Well, they tried to explain that away with his IQ being incredibly fucking high.
Oh my god, when they pulled that, it was like, really?
Yeah, I mean, they had to give some reason. Otherwise, a boy of, like, a 17-year-old boy being able to do what he does in the show would have been, ridiculous. And
it is ridiculous, though.
It is ridiculous, but it's still like, okay, I guess I get why he's doing this. Also, he has been trained in certain things for his entire life, so... But you're right, they go really overboard at certain parts, or they really emphasize highlighting how everybody sees him as this kind of god figure. Like,
yeah.
For better or worse, some people, his enemies call him, oh, you're like, if devils would walk the earth, they would have your face. Like, you are the true devil. You are scary because you're so intelligent and so dangerous. You're like an animal. And his friends are like, oh my god, they don't really say that. They also say he's kind of scary at times. But, you get the feeling, especially AJ is like, sees him like as this kind of angelic person sometimes. Maybe he's the only one who sees him like, sees that he is just a hurt kid down to the core. So that's why he can relate so well to Ash. But some of the other characters definitely like adore him, seem like this impressive figure. I think Sing is one of them, for example, who is, for a really dumb reason, really angry at him at one point in the show.
Oh my god.
Yeah, we all have misunderstandings. And then he's like, immediately when he encounters him, he's like, oh no, I cannot even match that guy because he's out of this world. And that turns him around kinda, which I was kinda happy about, because it immediately removes that misunderstanding part, which could have been problematic and really annoying. But it's also like, he didn't really do anything or that much of an impressive thing, and you're like so fucking intimidated immediately. It's like, oh my god, that guy is, I don't know, he's a fucking super soldier. He is Jesus. Yeah.
No, he's really not.
Yeah. And I mean, you're right. The show isn't always able to build a bridge between that and him being like this very frail and hurt creature that can only like let down his defenses for a certain person.
Yeah, I mean, he feels like they wanted to paint him like a fucking superhero. And I feel like they kind of, at many points, let that get way out of hand. And that's why,
superhero is maybe the wrong term. I would call it maybe a super soldier.
Maybe, I don't know. I watched this show beginning to end. I thought about dropping it, but it's because of this just like, oh, look at how perfect and how cool Ash is. Just constantly harping on that all the fucking time. I was like, we get it.
Yeah.
Stop.
Well, he's not perfect. I mean, he's very capable, but he makes mistakes, definitely.
Well, no. Not to us, the viewer, but to everyone that surrounds him, except for one person.
Yeah.
Except for one person.
It gets a bit overboard, that's true. I mean, the other characters also see his flaws or his damage, at least some of them do, but still, they still say like, oh my god, he's so impressive. And you said superhero, like I said, I would say kind of super soldier, or at least the show acknowledges, or at least through Ash's own eyes, that he kills a lot of people, and that is not a good thing. I mean, he really struggles with that at a lot of points in the show.
Yeah, that's fair, I guess.
It's not like the show is doing too much with that, but it at least brings it up, and he has to kind of work through that. I don't think it goes too deep into that, or super deep into that. I wished it would have done that more, especially relating to his other trauma stuff, and that would have been more interesting, in my opinion. But he's not like this super white knight heroic figure. He is still, painted as a criminal, though that being mostly due to circumstances. Okay, he is a creature of his environment. He was turned into what he is today, and that's also why he kind of relates to AG, because AG probably still sees the person that he in him that he could have been, and he likes that. He's the person that is not scared of him, sees him just as a person, as a normal boy, and treats him that way, and that's why Ash likes him so much. It gives him the ability to get off the edge when he's around him and loosen up a bit, be the normal boy he never was. Ash even spells it out by saying that AJ is the only person that he can think of that is just plain nice to him without wanting anything in return. And yeah, like I said, AJ is also the only one Ash completely opens up to in regards to his past as a male prostitute and experience with being raped and physically abused in many ways by Golzina and other people. So it's clear that AG is the only one who gives Ash the chance to lower his defenses for once. But like I said before, I don't feel this happens early enough in the show to earn some of the stuff Ash does to ensure AG's safety in the first half sometimes. I feel like, okay, why do you already feel so strongly about this person? Maybe it's just this instant, supposed to be this instant connection that is beyond explanation. I guess that happens sometimes. But yeah, it was a bit unrealistic. But hey, it's an anime. So I guess some shortcuts have to be taken. But yeah, I really like the first half of the show. It kicks off with some great action beats, some really evil cliffhangers, in my opinion. That kept me at the edge of my seat. Immediately makes it clear that the stakes in the show are very high, and endearing characters will not be spared. Ash, Max, and Shorter are all great characters. I liked all of them. AJ is nice too, but he is a bit on the boring side, mostly because his persona doesn't really go beyond very nice, but also very naive person. But yeah, the action is good. There is a lot of stuff happening. Some mysteries get uncovered. There are some twists and turns, and I just really like the look of the show, like I said. And then we get several very big emotional moments at the midpoint of the show that at least pulled me in and got me excited for how the show would build up to its finale from that point forward. And then the series pretty much completely falls apart in its second half. At least for me, it did.
Did you feel like a lot of the characters that they were trying to paint as villains felt almost like comically evil?
In parts, definitely. I think,
like, especially not discounting some of the things he does to Ash, as they're kind of disgusting. But Eduardo Fox. Yeah,
we get to him. There are several of those in there, and that's not the only problem with a lot of the antagonists in there. The second half feels improvised. It all felt sloppily stitched together, like they either didn't really know where to go with the story from this point on, or decided to take way too many detours to get there. Like plot points and characters get introduced and dropped on a whim and without much ado. A lot of characters like Yulon way overstay their welcome, even though they don't really contribute to the story anymore. Like, why was he in this show so long? I mean, I get how the show explains it, but he does not play a very, important part in my opinion, and there is no emotional feedback to that character that I could resonate with, and I mostly found him super annoying. He should not have been in that show so long. He was very promising in the beginning, but at one point he is done with his arc, kind of, because he has achieved his goal, the thing that he set out to do, and he just stays in the show and is feels some animosity towards a certain character because of a kind of relatable reason, I guess, but it was still like, okay, that's the only reason you're in here, that why you're still playing a part. That's a waste of time. You are a waste of time.
Yeah.
And I would say that happens to some characters and some plot points. It's like that don't go anywhere. It's all very random and doesn't manage to build a consistent structure that gets me as a viewer invested. The best example is probably like Banana Fish itself, which as a plot point gets pretty much dropped in the last third of the show. Like, they just stop talking about it. It just stopped smattering until the very last episode. And it's like, okay, this was a very important thing in the beginning, and then you build up all this stupid political corruption bullshit shit around it, and military secrets and stuff like that, and then you just don't bring it up anymore. And that was super weird to me. It was like, okay, now this is only about the gangs doing things, and some new characters get introduced that don't really do anything really, and don't really matter in both plot and emotional way. The investigation into the conspiracy and origin of Banana Fish is not that interesting either, and tends to drag the show down. Like all the stuff, I mean, I like Max, but all the investigation stuff with him and Ash and and Max's reporter body and everything, all of that didn't really do anything for me. It would have been better if they made like that part more of a mystery and not let us in on most of the details and important players in the beginning. But it's mostly about Max and Ash trying to find enough proof to publicly destroy Golsina and everyone around him. And this just, it's like, okay, we know all of this, and you finding the proof for that just isn't that interesting, or that doesn't really need to happen on screen, in my opinion. Yeah. And then they completely, like I said, for one reason or another, they drop it, and then it only comes back into play at the very end of the show. And it's like, okay, this feels like padding. This feels like filler. We don't need this. Why is this in here? You could have taken that out. And I don't know, that kind of just felt unnecessary and dragged a bit. I also thought things would get a bit more interesting again once Blanca is introduced, because of his relationship with Ash and their shared history, because he's his teacher and everything. But they like barely elaborate on that and don't go anywhere interesting with that relationship either. It's like, okay, now he's doing this without spoiling anything, and now he's doing that. And okay, that's that character. All right, sure.
He seemed like he couldn't make up his mind about what he wanted to do, and it's like, wow, that makes you really interesting, dude.
Yeah, super random teacher guy. I mean, he could have really done something with that. They had a 2-year history where he was teaching Ash stuff under Golsina, and it's like, okay, all right, there's a mentor thing going on here. Have those two like really face off against each other. Have these two some emotional common ground, some kind of deeper relationship, but there really isn't anything there. Mm-hmm. I mean, you get the feeling that Blanca understands him in a way that other people don't, but that doesn't really amount to much than him preaching to Ash in regards to certain things and telling him what to do and what not to do. And that's just kind of boring. Because also those lessons that Blanca's trying to teach him, we already know. And Ash even has partially realized for himself. So that's like, you don't really fulfill any purpose in this. The same sadly kind of applies for the relationship between Ash and Eiji, because after they had their heart-to-heart at the midpoint of the show, which is really good in my opinion, like all the scenes right at the midpoint where that relationship is furthered, where they actually spend some time together, where Ash opens up about everything to Eiji, all that stuff that was like deeply heartfelt emotional stuff was really good. But after that, like, any further development of that relationship gets completely abandoned for the rest of the show, and they basically only serve as damsels in distress for each other, who need to be rescued from several dangerous situations. It's like, oh god, now Ash is somewhere where we need to save him from, and now Eiji is somewhere where we need to save him from, and then it gets switched around again, and then that happens again. And that's all that happens with those two characters, like in the in the rest of the show. It's like, wait, did you set out to do something more with these characters? And don't they have like a deeper connection where it's like, okay, I can help you become human again or work through your shitty past? And they start that. They cover some ground there, but then they just kind of drop that. And that's a shame. Because, like I said, that relationship started really strong. And even though Eiji overcame his initial, like, indecisiveness, you know, he has this injury because he was a pole vaulter and everything. And yeah, he got kind of hesitant about his career and everything. All of that kind of gets resolved pretty quickly in the beginning. His character growth kind of was done at that point. But he was still serving as a vital role in helping Ash to overcome or at least face some of his trauma and grievances. So that felt like, okay, you need to be in the story because you're still helping our main character to work through this, and you are the one thing that keeps him grounded and gives him a chance of leading a human life, maybe at some point. But then at a certain point, they kind of bend that, and it's on like, I need to rescue that person that is important to me, but we are not furthering that relationship in any way or form beyond that. So yeah, that's a waste in my opinion, and it's a shame. This should probably have been a 13-episode show. With some characters and plot points taken out from the manga that we just didn't need in there. It spends too much time on meandering plots that don't really go anywhere. There is that stuff in the asylum, for example, with fucking Dr. what was his name? Mannerheim.
Yeah.
Let me think of an old audio drama that I listened to. Was a character in there. Anyway, but yeah, that felt like those 2 episodes, the first time they are there, it's like, why is this in here? You could have like solved them getting to that person a completely different way that wouldn't have wasted like 2 episodes. And there's a lot of stuff in that show, especially in the second half, that feels like that. It's like, okay, this doesn't need to be in here. You're just wasting time and it's not fun to watch. I mean, the show does some comedy in certain parts, which also feels kind of misplaced already, but that 2 bunch of episodes is weirdly hijinksy, even for the rest of the comedy in this show. Like that Asylum episode is like, there's suddenly so many visual gags in there. It's like, what? Why is that in here? That kind of doesn't fit the tone of the story. A lot of filler, at least in the second half of the show. First half, not so much. That first half feels kind of tight writing wise, but the second half definitely. There could have been so much stuff cut from that, so many characters cut from that, and yeah, it's too much stuff that doesn't go anywhere. I think the only clear goal throughout the show seems to be indulging in the extensive display of its main character suffering a lot, because yeah. That's what the show does. I mean, given the subject matter and Ash's past and everything, that is a valid reason or a valid thing to go into. But like I mentioned in the very beginning, the show tends to revel in that a lot and to revel in the drama and the theatrics of it instead of actually, I don't know, working through it in a meaningful way sometimes. And I feel like that does a disservice to the subject matter, to people who actually deal with that trauma. I mean, it's nice that it actually talks about that stuff in a kind of honest way, but again, it felt exploitative to me in certain parts. So yeah, even though it's not, explicitly showing all the violence and everything, and the actual rapes or whatever, but still, it feels like it always loves to go a bit too much into, okay, we need to find a way to make Ash go back to suffer again so that he doesn't become a happy person just by the virtue of Eiji being around him. We need to make him suffer again. And now things are looking up again. Oh, it's time to make Ash suffer again. And that I felt unnecessary in certain parts. And because it was happening constantly, it was becoming predictable, and that takes away some of the impact. If you have some few key emotional moments in there where stuff goes to shit, or the emotional beats that hit home very hard, those become more effective as if you spend the majority of the show's runtime into a constant state of suffering, which, of course, that character is in. It makes sense. But you reveling in it all the time, it feels like it's being too exploitative. And I think a show we recently watched, which is going into completely different direction tone-wise, was Golden Kamuy, which had these very key short moments that were very emotional and felt very earnest in a show that was otherwise totally bananas. Bananas, get it? But, that felt still... because
it made it work, though.
It made it work, exactly. It felt earned because we spent a lot of time with those characters. It felt honest enough, and it felt close to reality enough that it worked for these characters and had partially a bigger impact on me than some of the scenes relating to the trauma of Ash in the show. So, yeah, it all comes down to execution with those things, and I think Banana Fish stumbles often in that regard.
I mean, there's no discounting some of the subject matter in this show, because it's worth having a conversation about. But
oh, definitely.
Everything else that happens around it just feels like a mess.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, I'm amazed I didn't drop this show. I really feel like it probably should have been dropped.
At least I would say, like I said, until episode 13 or something, after Ash faces off against a certain antagonist, I think up to that point the show is really good, in my opinion. A few shortcomings, sure. Uneven in certain parts, sure. But I still think up to that point it was very worth a watch. I like the character interaction, everything. But after that, it just completely was downhill from there and never recovered. And if you expect there to be a payoff for the incredibly long build-up towards the final confrontation between Golzina and Ash, which is the setup for this show, you will be thoroughly disappointed. Instead, the last third introduces a new antagonist that is the most boring, cardboard, cut-out, flat, over-the-top anime villain you can possibly imagine. And John already mentioned him before.
Yeah, like
I hated that guy.
Comically, cartoonishly evil.
Yes, I mean, he's not cackling in every scene that he's introduced in. Quite the opposite. He's just a stone-cold military killer, badass guy who's also a rapist and an asshole to the max and everything. But you've seen that guy millions of times before, and there's nothing to his character. Nothing beyond him being an evil asshole. He has no real relationship to Ash. He has no real relationship to any of the other characters. He's just a hired gun, and he is capable of killing, I guess, and has a lot of soldiers that he can bring, mercenaries, whatever, and thus he's a force to be reckoned with. But aside from that, he brings nothing to the table here, and he is kind of the final confrontation, and ruins the setup of this show, which is like this long built-up war between Ash and Golzina, two people who have a very storied relationship, who hate each other, but also Golzina at least kind of loves Ash because he wants to make him his prodigy. He loves him in his own weird, twisted, very disgusting way, but Ash still means something to him. That is made clear in the show several times, over and over again. He does some things he probably shouldn't do because Ash is important to him in a way. And that could have been a really strong finale if you paid that off in a certain way, if you executed on that in a certain way, but they don't. That entire plotline is such a giant anticlimax and is just resolved in a dumbest, most unrewarding, most, oh my god.
Unrewarding is a good way to put it, because at that moment I was like, none of these characters earned this.
Yeah, it feels like the ending to the whole thing feels like a badly written Disney movie finale or something.
You're not even wrong.
It's really bad. That final episode made me really angry. It was really well animated. It looked good, but everything that happens in that finale, everything made me angry. And that accounts for the ending itself, which feels like this super forced tragedy ending that resolves from a fucking misunderstanding, or at least someone not getting all the info. And I hate when that happens in series, in media, whatever. It's just this fucking dumb, oh, we forgot to tell that person's a very important development in this ongoing war. Oh, okay, so now this results in tragedy. Whoops! I hate this! I hate this so much when this happens in series. Like, maybe some of you say, oh, Sissy, but that's the tragic part of it. No, that's not tragic, that's stupidity.
That's bad writing.
That's bad writing, that's contrived writing, that's a constructed mess. And I hate it when that happens. And that makes me very angry, as you can tell, probably. And the show resolving in that kind of way, and apparently the manga too. I was hoping when I was looking up the manga, oh, maybe the manga ends in a different way that is not so dumb. No, it ends in the same fucking way. And it's stupid, and it's contrived, and it's fucking forced, tragic, oh, please, roll a tear material. And I hate that. I think that's stupid, and I think it's lazy. It's super fucking lazy. It's tragedy for tragedy's sake, and make the audience cry. And yeah, I did not like it.
Yeah, it made me cry because I felt like I wasted my time.
Yeah. So
is that harsh? Maybe.
No. It feels like, I mean, at that point I was already not invested in the story anymore, to be fair. At least not that much. I was hoping for at least some good bookend. It's like, a good ending can elevate a mediocre show, as we've said in the past. Sometimes it's nicer if a show doesn't start that strong, or if, stumbles in the middle and then ends on a very strong note, then you keep it in good memory in a certain way. But it's just, from the midway point on, Banana Fish is a steadily decline in quality, not animation-wise, but story and writing-wise. It just goes downhill, straight forward, and then runs off a cliff, by the way the ending rolls around. And that was really disappointing. I wonder if some or most of the shortcomings in terms of writing result from this being adapted from, older source material. I mean, writing has, at least in certain parts, at least in, series and everything, and I want to say in manga too in general, has advanced since the 80s a bit. So maybe that's the reason, but I don't want to give the show a free pass because of that, because you could have changed things around for the adaptation. You didn't have to stay completely faithful. If there is stuff in there that doesn't work, you could have taken that out. You could have switched that around. You could have changed that. And it feels like, aside from updating the tech and making it like, okay, this could kind of work in current day, apparently the people behind this didn't really do the legwork to make the rest of the story and all the emotional stuff and all the plot beats work and make it like a tighter show. Like we said, this should have probably been a 12-episode, 13-episode show with a lot of the filler material taken out. Yeah, people who read the old manga probably would have complained because, oh no, my favorite character is not in there. Yeah, still, sorry, if that is the price, I'm willing to pay it. Like, I have not read the source material, to be fair, but it's like, if this is a faithful adaptation in anything but the time period, then that source material is, in my opinion, not very good. I'm sorry. Then if they didn't add anything for the anime, then that source material is also an unfocused mess. Mm-hmm. Despite it tackling a very difficult subject matter in an honest way, and I find that very commendable that is in there and that the author tried to do that. And maybe it comes from an honest place too, and that is important too. But the rest of the story, everything around it, just completely falls apart at a certain point in the show, and that feels like a waste. And you could have fixed that, at least some of it, if you did the work. Yeah, I haven't come out of a show that disappointed in a long while. Mostly because, like I said, I really liked the first half of this show. Like, a lot. And then, it just completely abandoning all the things that are interesting and falling flat on its face in the second half was just a letdown, a giant-ass letdown, and a bummer. So, I mean, I can deal with tragedies. I can deal with sad stories. I'm not a baby anymore. At least I think so. I hope so. But but they need to be earned. They need to be well written, and they don't need to be like contrived bullshit. And this was contrived bullshit, in my opinion. So, yeah. It sounds like, John, you felt the same.
Did a kind of a disservice to the name you borrowed from J.D. Salinger. I mean, I am only cursory familiar with A Perfect Day for Banana Fish, but, like I said, I think trying to take this name and make it your own, maybe all the interstitial stuff in the manga is better, but in the show it was just, nah.
Not worth it. If you want a good crime story with gang setting, I recommend 91 Days instead.
Yes.
Production-wise, not as solid as Banana Fish, but story-wise, much more coherent. Very clear emotional through line, very understandable main characters that you also feel have like a deep emotional connection at a certain point, and the ending of that feels much better and more earned than this one. Yeah, and there are probably manga out there that do a better job of exploring a relationship similar to that of Ash and Eiji. I don't know if there is a series that has such an honest approach to the whole subject of sexual abuse trauma as this show does, but I think Banana Fish is still too focused on like the action and crime plots and political stuff that don't really go anywhere, instead of concentrating on dealing with the psychological and emotional aspect of the hardships Ash has endured, and Eiji is helping him working through that. All that stuff should have been maybe the focal point of the show just in general, and not been so much of the, okay, now we have this new gang plot point and this stuff, and all the stuff that really doesn't get you emotionally engaged or doesn't really matter in the long run at all. If I think of all the fucking characters that get introduced with that stupid political intrigue plot that just fucking get dropped by the wayside with much of a mention afterwards, it's ridiculous.
God.
Like a more condensed story focusing on just Ash, Eiji, and Golzine probably would have worked a lot better and would have been much more emotional, engaging, and rewarding in the long run. Like this, it's a so-so underwritten, padded out gang crime drama, and the ending makes it feel like a cheap tragedy for the sake of it. If you are in the mood for a true downer of a show, in more ways than one, that deals with a harsh but at least underexplored subject matter, and you dig the visual style, maybe give it a go. It's on Amazon. But otherwise, you should stay clear of this one. And that is a wrap on the 68th episode of Anime Brain Freeze. All the music in our show is from the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack by the amazing Jake Kaufman. Please go to vrt.bandcamp.com and check out his awesome work. Our show is available on most of the popular podcast services, but it's always worth visiting animebrainfreeze.com for our review index and some interesting articles linked in our episode release posts. Follow us on Twitter at AnimeBrainFreeze. We tweet regular updates and fun anime-related stuff there. Leave us comments and questions on Facebook and our YouTube channel, or send an email to animebrainfreeze@gmail.com. We would love to read your feedback. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you had a good time, and please join us again on our next show. Macht's gut.
See y'all next time. Next time on Anime Brain Freeze.
A transformation from so goddamn dumb to genuinely cool.
And a saga of the rise to true idol status.